Imagine the sun disappearing at 4 in the afternoon. The temperature outside is negative 30 degrees. There is no house, no coat you bought online, no heater you can dial up, no food in a fridge, just you and the dark, and the cold closing in like a fist. Most people assume that ancient humans just toughed it out, that they were hardier, tougher, more primal than us. But that is completely wrong. What they actually did to survive is one of the most fascinating and forgotten chapters in human history. And the twist at the end, what scientists recently discovered about what early humans might have done during the very worst winters, will genuinely change how you think about your own body. So stay with me until the very end, because the last part is the strangest part. We are going back roughly 45,000 years. This is when the first modern humans pushed out of Africa and walked into something they had never experienced before. A northern winter. And the world they stepped into was not the world we know. Europe was a vast windswept tundra. Temperatures could drop to levels that would kill an unprotected human in hours. There were no trees across enormous stretches of land, just frozen plains, howling winds, and in the distance, woolly mammoths, cave lions, and short-faced bears moving through the dark. And our ancestors had nothing but their minds. So how did they survive? Let us start with the most obvious answer, and then peel back why it is only the beginning of the story. Shelter. Everyone pictures the caveman in a cave. And yes, some ancient humans used caves. But here is what is fascinating. The notion of the prehistoric caveman huddled in a deep, rocky hole is largely a myth. Caves were useful when available, but they were also cold, dark, and hard to heat. What early humans actually preferred was something far more clever. They found shallow overhangs in cliff faces, just deep enough to block the wind. And then they transformed them. They draped the entrance with enormous sheets of animal hide, sealing out the cold. They built fires inside. They turned a rocky shelf into a warm, insulated pocket. And when there were no cliffs, they built their own structures. In central Ukraine, in 1965, a farmer was digging to expand his basement. His shovel hit something. He pulled it out. It was the jawbone of a woolly mammoth. He kept digging. More bones. Eventually, archaeologists arrived. What they uncovered changed everything we thought we knew about Ice Age architecture. 4 circular huts, each one built almost entirely from mammoth bones. These structures at Mezhyrich, Ukraine, dated to around 18,000 years ago, were made from 149 mammoth bones arranged in careful rings up to 10 meters across. Skulls, tusks, and ribs formed the walls. Animal hides were stretched across the frame to insulate the space, and at the center of each structure, a fire. These were not desperate animals cowering from the cold. These were engineers. These were architects building the first domed structures in human history out of the bones of the largest animals on Earth. And they worked. Inside one of those domed huts, on a freezing Ukrainian plain, a small group of humans could sit warm enough to talk, to eat, to survive the night. But shelter was only the first problem, because staying warm inside is useless if you have to go outside to find food. And this is where the story gets even more impressive. Around 40,000 years ago, something remarkable appeared in the archaeological record. Bone needles. Tiny, precise, carved from animal bone. Sharp enough to pierce skin. These needles were used to sew. And what they sewed was not a loose animal fur draped over the shoulders. What they sewed was something much closer to what you are wearing right now. Tailored, layered garments. A soft inner lining of fur pressed against the skin to trap body heat. An outer layer of tough hide to block the wind. Fitted sleeves, fitted trousers, boots designed with grip for icy surfaces. In Russia, sculptures carved around 24,000 years ago show human figures wearing what look like tailored parka jackets. Think about that for a moment. 24,000 years ago, your ancestors were already solving the same problem you solve every winter morning when you choose what to wear. They just had to make every piece of that clothing by hand from a dead animal with a needle carved from its own bones. So now you have shelter. You have clothing. But you still need to eat. And this is where things get almost unbelievably creative. One of the most important words in Ice Age survival was not fire. It was not warmth. It was planning. Early humans learned to think months ahead. In one famous hunting ground in eastern France, Ice Age hunters used the landscape itself as a trap. Every fall and every spring, they lit fires to drive migrating herds of wild horses and reindeer into a narrow valley, funneled naturally by a tall limestone tower known as the Roche de Solutré. Once the animals were in the valley, they could be killed efficiently and safely. The meat was then dried, smoked, and stored. Archaeological evidence shows this coordinated hunt went on for tens of thousands of years. A seasonal factory. But storing food was its own science. Evidence from Qesem Cave in Israel, dating back 420,000 years, shows that ancient humans were wrapping bone marrow in animal skins and saving it for later, storing bones for up to 9 weeks before cracking them open to eat. Other evidence suggests they submerged large cuts of mammoth meat in cold ponds, weighed down with stones, where the frigid water kept the meat fresh far longer than leaving it in open air would allow. And in winter conditions, they simply froze it. The world's oldest freezer was a snowbank. So now imagine you are there. It is the middle of January. You are inside a dome of mammoth bones. The fire is burning in the center. You have food stored. You have warm, layered clothing hung near the entrance. Outside, the temperature is brutal, but in here, you are actually okay. You have solved the physical problem of winter, but here is what is fascinating. There was still one more problem to solve. A psychological one. What do you do with all the time? In winter, there is almost nothing to hunt. Gathering plants is impossible. The days are short and dark, and you are packed into a small space with the same small group of people. For months. This is where the fire becomes something more than just a heat source. Sharing a fire, researchers believe, was one of the most socially binding acts in human history. People gathered around it not just to stay warm, but to talk, to share stories, to pass on knowledge, where the herds were moving, which plants were safe to eat, how to read a change in the wind. Fire extended the hours of the day into darkness, giving early humans time they had never had before. Time to make tools, time to create art, time to think. And it turns out that the skills passed around that fire. The knowledge about migration routes, about which animals to target, about how to tan a hide, were just as important to survival as any physical tool. Language kept people alive. Community kept people alive. But here is the part that genuinely shocked scientists. And this is the part I said to stay for. In 2020, researchers Juan Luis Arzuaga and Antonis Bartziocas published a study in the journal L'Anthropologie. They had been examining a cave in northern Spain called Cima de los Huesos, which translates to the pit of bones. Inside this cave, they found over 7,500 fossilized human bones from 29 individuals. These are some of the oldest known human remains in Europe, between 300,000 and 600 years old. And when the scientists studied the bones closely, they found something strange. Damage. Specific damage that matches one thing: hyperparathyroidism, a condition where the body's hormone levels shift in response to dramatically slowing down its metabolism. The kind of damage that appears in animals when they hibernate. The scientists concluded that early humans, at least some of them, may have spent the harshest winter months in a form of deep biological hibernation, slowing their heart rate, burning fat reserves at a crawl, drifting in and out of sleep for weeks or possibly months at a time. Think about that. Your body may have once been capable of something you have completely lost, the ability to simply go quiet, to turn down the volume on your biology, to wait out the storm. Now, this idea is heavily debated. Most scientists agree that more evidence is needed before we can say for certain that it happened. But the bones are real. The damage is real, and the alternative, that these early humans had some other explanation for the same damage, has not been fully explained. Here is the truth about what those ancient winters required. It was not brute toughness. It was intelligence. It was planning. It was community. It was ingenuity so advanced that these people built domed houses from mammoth bones, sewed layered clothing from animal hides, stockpiled food months in advance, used rivers and ponds as refrigerators, and may have even found a way to biologically power down in the worst conditions of all. Every single instinct that kept them alive is still inside you. The urge to pull people close when things get hard. The instinct to gather and save and prepare. The deep animal need to sit by something warm when the world outside feels dark and cold. You feel those things every winter. You always have. Those are not just habits. Those are 45,000 years of survival knowledge written into your body. The cold was never the enemy. Isolation was. The ones who made it through were never the strongest. They were the ones who stayed together.